I'm George Galloway.
I am Steve Topple.
And we are Topple Galloway. And we both got man flu, but we're going to manfully struggle through it because the show must go on. Steve, the Labour conference in Liverpool was almost a throwback to an earlier age. It was unpredictable. There were clashes, most of them off stage, behind the screen, if you like, but nonetheless impacting on the public relations of the whole thing. I would have thought myself it'll go down as a disastrous conference on two counts at least, though there may be more. First of all, the Labour Party threw away the opportunity, which was there, fully justified, and would have changed, if not everything, then most things. They had the opportunity to change their rules so that before every general election, every Labour MP has to be re-chosen as a candidate. Now, on the principle of les encouragements des autres, for the encouragement of the others, the threat that one is to be deselected will influence an MP's behaviour, conduct, application to the job in a way that nothing else can. Because I've got to tell you, as someone who was an MP almost 30 years, for the vast majority of MPs, they care only about one thing, and that is continuing to be an MP. If they think they've got a job for life and no one can touch them, well, they're likely to behave in a certain way. If they know that every 4 years they're going to have to come in front of the members of their local party and justify not just their ideological positions, their politics, but their work rate, the number of times they spoke, asked questions, the number of times they did surgeries in the constituency, the effort they've made to get along with the local party whose candidate they are. All these things would have been every 4 years up for grabs. And that would have produced a completely different culture amongst Labour MPs. And Labour threw away that opportunity for reasons I'm not entirely clear of. Why don't we start with that issue and let me get your take on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I'm not entirely clear on the issue either, why it panned out the way it did. I'm in some private group DMs on Twitter, and there was a lot of toing and froing and a lot of arguments about the issue between Labour members. But it's just the problem with it is it's now completely, firstly, it's left them in the same position the party was in 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 3 years ago when Corbyn was first elected. That's this infighting and this stabbing in the metaphorical back of Corbyn by their MPs can continue, which not only affects their image within the electorate, but also affects Corbyn's confidence to lead the party.
Must do, yeah. I mean, you can't go 3 years, day and night, 24/7 with this kind of subversion, and it doesn't affect
No, of course, and he seems the kind of man who it would affect him. I don't think he's a sort of water off the duck's back kind of person. But moreover, any general election that will be forthcoming, whether as the rumour mill keeps on spinning that it's going to be soon, or whether it is in 2022 as it's scheduled to be, any general election will now play at the same as the 2017 one, where you have Labour MPs on doorsteps with their campaigners undermining the leader of the party, and we'll be in the same position again. They had the perfect opportunity, Corbyn's section of the Labour Party, to sort this issue out, and it's been thrown away, and it's going to, I think it's been played down a lot because there hasn't been the coverage and the hoo-ha, if you like, about it, which I think there should have been. And I think it's going to cause trouble for several years now. It's just going to be a continuation.
Well, in perpetuity, because it means, as you rightly say, whenever the election is, frankly, if it's earlier, it's even more true. It'll be the same parliamentary Labour Party that is elected as currently exists. And as that same parliamentary Labour Party, which currently exists, hates Corbyn, 80% of them at least, what's the purpose of that? And you had a chance to sweep all that away and either change the behaviour of existing MPs or change the MPs themselves. And they've gone for a fudge. Will not bore the viewers with the intricate details of that fudge.
There's a fudge. Because
the long and the short of it is hardly any, if any, Labour MPs are going to be removed. So that opportunity has been lost. And that will be significant for Jeremy Corbyn, but it's also significant for what, or who rather, comes after Jeremy Corbyn. Because let's postulate, if this Parliament runs until 2022, which legally it must, doesn't mean it will, but legally it must, it's under the Fixed Term Parliament Act. We had the last one in 2017, so the next one is 2022. Jeremy Corbyn isn't going to be the Labour leader going into an election in 2022.
No, I don't think so.
Because, if I'm not wrong, that would make him 75, and no British Prime Minister since Churchill. In fact, it would make him older than Churchill. Churchill was 69 when he became Prime Minister for the first time. I don't think that's credible. So I think that Corbyn, if it goes all the way, Corbyn's going to have to find a successor, anoint a successor. You are the Corbyn, and that candidate's going to have to be supported and elected. But under the rules for the election of leader, which again they fudged, it's perfectly possible that the obvious Corbyn candidate will not be on the ballot paper because not enough MPs will nominate them. And those MPs have now got nothing to fear because they're now not going to be deselected. I mean, do the maths.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's really not about politics; it's about numbers.
Yeah, and it's as you quite rightly put. I mean, if you okay, so the sort of possible candidates which are already being touted, there was you obviously have Angela Rayner, you have Emily Thornberry, you have Rebecca Long Bailey. Obviously, McDonnell is still in the frame. There's sort of outsiders who would like to see Chris Williamson pushed towards the role, maybe. But as you quite rightly point out, the likelihood of any of these necessarily even getting on the ballot could well be slim.
Actually, centrists can get on the ballot. People who are able to get just a few nominations from left-wing people and just a few from right. Not that there's many left-wing MPs. I mean, there's not, I kid you not, there's not a dozen left-wing MPs.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I think the point is that the only reason Corbyn got in was because they thought they could get away with doing it, and that he wouldn't actually win. Or as people like Frank Field claimed, it was to open up the debate in the party.
He was to be the lipstick on the ballot.
Exactly, and they're not going to make that mistake again, are they?
Never. So, and some of those candidates will get on easily, especially the women that you mentioned, because there is this argument out there that the next leader has to be a woman.
Yeah.
I have known 2 women prime ministers in Britain.
That's gone well, hasn't it?
I'm not sure it's necessarily the best card to play, that it must be a woman.
I don't think it's just, and I agree with you. On that note, I think it's important that we make our positions clear, because I'm very clear on it. I'm against this notion that you should have certain percentages of criteria of female MPs or female people on boardrooms. It should be on the merit of the candidate, surely. And
definitely, because unless you're going to claim that Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May were somehow a gain for humanity because they were women.
Or for feminism, even. I mean,
exactly.
Two of the most anti-feminist prime
ministers.
They were
anti-feminist, anti-women, anti-people. They were both disasters. But let's say Long Bailey, Rayner, and definitely Thornberry. She definitely was going all out for the leadership in Liverpool this week. But a candidate like Chris Williamson or Richard Bergen would be the kind of candidate I would like. John McDonnell, depending on when this is, because John's not much younger than Jeremy, but I mean, God forbid if Jeremy walked under the Clapham omnibus tomorrow, then John McDonnell would be the leader. The fact that he's not a woman would be an absurd objection. Of course, in these gender fluid times, he could just claim that he identifies as a woman, and that would be the problem
story.
solved.
Good grief.
But so MacDonald, if it was early, Bergen, Williamson, if it was late, they'll find it difficult now getting onto the ballot paper in favour of the kind of more centrist options.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, just like on the MP selections, the left, whatever the left is, had this power in its hand to culturally shift and decisively change both those things, leader, MPs, and they failed to do so. They decided not to do so.
Yeah.
That's the puzzling thing.
It is, yes, but it kind of sums up the whole conference, really, doesn't it? I think
Neither one thing nor the other.
Neither one thing or the other, and ultimately a massive piece of stickly, sweet, sugary fudge. Ultimately, because moving on from the open selections and that situation, we then had Brexit dramas, didn't we, as well?
Would have been far better if they hadn't dealt with it at all. If they'd done what they did last year and basically ignore the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Because what they have achieved now is both the worst of both worlds, but I think potentially fatal to their general election. They put on the table that which Corbyn and MacDonald repeatedly said, including on the day of the debate.
Yeah.
John MacDonald said on the day of the debate, if there is to be another referendum on Brexit, it will not include Remain, because that decision is already made and we respect the result of the referendum. Now, I don't want another referendum, but I could live with one if it's about the terms.
Yeah.
What I cannot accept, will not accept, and will never vote for, is having a referendum, getting a result, and then having it again, and maybe even again, until you've changed the result. I can't do that, and I think that's a knife at the heart of British democracy, and a very dangerous one too.
I think so.
It can actually risk social peace in the country.
I agree. Yeah.
I'm not over dramatizing.
No, I don't think you are. I was sat at the breakfast table discussing it with Nicola this morning, and while I'm kind of neither here nor there on the Brexit issue, really, but I think that a second referendum is dangerous for numerous reasons. As you say, possible social unrest, but not least because there was accusations of malpractice and lying and manipulation from both sides in the previous referendum. So is it all
unlike most elections?
So, yeah, exactly. First point. So, is it all going to be fair again? I think going back and asking this question again,
it'll be a more difficult question, Steve.
Exactly.
It was Remain or Leave.
Yeah.
A new referendum would be: do you want to remain on the Norway model, footnote, appendix, the Canada model, footnote, appendix?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you have a referendum on a multi-option set of complexities like that? I mean, it'll need to be like an encyclopedia rather than
exactly.
a ballot.
Well, exactly. Everyone will need to have done a bloody degree before they're able to vote in it. But the point is that the last referendum was a fudge as well, because both sides neither argued their points honestly or particularly well. But also, as you say, it's an undermining of democracy. I mean, I do understand the thinking behind it, because the thinking is coming from middle-class liberals who inside their bubble think it's the biggest issue facing this country, and I think they are knifing in the back, metaphorically again, whole swathes of the country who, rightly or wrongly, still believe that Leave is the best option.
Yeah. By the way, if we did have another in-out referendum, I'm perfectly certain that Out would win it. In fact, with a bigger majority, because. And here's my third problem with the Labour conference, and in a way, for me, it's the most sad and the most profound. Labour is not the party I was kicked out of 15 years ago. It's a very different party now. And culturally, it is I think, an ocean away from its working class base from which it came and on which it rests. Labour, as seen through the prism of the conference, is London-centric, middle class, university educated, metropolitan in spirit and ethic, youth obsessed. And the Labour conferences I used to go to were, of course, by no means perfect, and I used to rail against them at the time. But they bore some relationship to what life is like for the British working class in the country. This conference didn't really. When the guy went to the rostrum and demanded that the chair stop referring to people as man and woman and find some gender neutral way, and was cheered wildly from the floor, something died inside of me, I've got to tell you.
Look, I mean, I'm all for gender fluidity and non-gender definition. However, I think the broader point you're making is that's the least of our bloody worries at the minute. And I agree.
So he was saying, the chair was saying, the man over there, followed by the woman over there. Yeah. What's wrong with that, Steve?
Well, look, it works on the assumption that these people identify as men and women. But look, it was really disappointing. I have to say I share your disappointment. I don't think I probably feel it as deeply as you, because for someone who has been
that was a long time in it,
so long, I've never been part of the Labour movement. I've always slightly rallied against the party. However, it was deeply disappointing, as I wrote, not least for their blanket disregard for disability in the welfare
state. That was amazing. How did that happen? Given we know, thanks to you, how many millions of people this affects.
Yeah. I mean,
why would you not discuss it?
It basically happened. The ins and outs of it was that composite motions were put forward, and while constituency Labour parties voted for welfare as an issue to be discussed, it was put to one side by the union and the affiliates vote. So basically, sort of momentum and some of the trade unions. But the point is that I completely agree with you. Firstly, because they didn't debate welfare at all is damning in itself. But then if you look at some of the policy proposals coming out as well, I think one Guardian columnist called John McDonnell's speech declaring class war in this country. It was anything but class war. I mean, it's so watered down still. And as we discussed on another programme the other day, in terms of a radical socialist agenda, it ain't that bloody
It's not that radical, no.
It's not that radical at all. No. But it was the accessibility of the conference as well. I've seen so many people and spoken to so many people who say they couldn't go because they couldn't afford it, they didn't feel that they fitted in necessarily there, and it does just sum up what so many people criticise Labour for, as you rightly point out, they're being metropolitan, middle class, university-led. I mean, some of the policy proposals, where was the grand moves on social housing? They've promised 20 million for renters' unions, for the 11 million private sector renters in this country. Nothing for social housing tenants at all. The welfare state.
There wasn't much bricks and mortar or bread and butter.
There wasn't. Welfare
I mean, look, let's take an issue. I'm, of course, a lifelong campaigner for Palestine. I'm over the moon at the unanimous decision of the conference and the sea of Palestinian flags and so on.
Voted to stop arms selling to Israel, didn't they?
Yeah, unanimously, which is a remarkable thing. And for someone like me, after 40 years of trying, I feel very proud of that. But why would you discuss the suffering of the Palestinian people, but not the suffering of people on welfare in Britain? It's another example. It's quite a cosmopolitan, middle-class, university-educated, youth-obsessed thing to do, to have a big debate on Palestine, but not on social housing. Because Palestine's something you feel and think about and talk about a lot. Social housing, what's that again? When was the last time I saw a social house? Welfare, what's that again? When's the last time I shook hands with someone that was on benefits and actually being killed by the government.
Yeah.
There's far more people killed by Ian Duncan Smith than even killed by the Israelis at the Gaza fence.
I have to say, Stu, in all honesty, and we haven't discussed this before filming, I really appreciate you saying that, because as someone who campaigns all the time on the state of Palestinians and their lives, for you to recognise that, I think is really important. So thank you. I really appreciate you saying that.
It's the Conservative conference next week will be equally cruel, crushing and unforgiving. I promise you, in the interest of balance.
Our social housing landlord, they've merged with another company called Clarion to now form the biggest social landlord in the UK. Now they can claim.
So how is it a social landlord?
And it's not, and it's also, and the whole thing is a tax fudge as well, because they use clever accounting trickery to get away with calling themselves a social landlord, because their profit-making elements are all registered under different companies. So their main account does not run a profit, but their subsidiaries, which they have 5 of, all run profits. And this is exactly, you're quite right to point that out, that this is the way it ends up going. If you're going to embrace communitarianism or something along those lines, do it fucking properly. Not, and that's again the whole Labour conference summed up. It's this half in, half out kind of neither here nor there measure. The same on education, what Angela Rayner was proposing. Free schools, wonderful. Nothing on private schools, nothing on grammar schools, apart from the same stuff about the VAT.
Good point.
Status.
I missed that.
Nothing on that. Again, with academisation, all she's proposing is that councils will have the power to take bad academy trusts back under council control. Nothing really to rein in academisation in full. It's this half in, half out. As you say, it's neither statist, it's neither communitarianist. It's kind of fucking nothing. What it more is, actually, what we discussed before, is moving towards this Nordic fucking failed model of socialism, which everyone seems to be praising in the press, that this is wonderful. I've seen a lot of commentators say, we're moving towards a Nordic model in Labour, that's wonderful. That's going fucking well in Sweden, isn't it?
All going well in Sweden.
Where the far right are on the rise after 40 years of the Nordic model.
Well, the Prime Minister has just been turfed out of office.
But that's great. I mean, it's the whole thing was a joke.
You should have filmed all that.
I know.
I have filmed all.
Oh, you have filmed it? Good. Excellent.
I just have to bleep the swearing out.
I'm sorry. but that's essentially what it is. And it's very disappointing. And it's
Our man flu abated.
Yes.
And we found ourselves in spate in full flow. Right.
Anyway.
What were we supposed to be talking about?
Instagram.
From Titoism to Instagram.
Find that on any other show. So the news broke this week that Mark Zuckerberg, head of Facebook, has been installing his own people covertly into Instagram, the company that Facebook bought for £1 billion a little while ago. Apparently the CEO...
£1 billion?
I think it's £1 billion.
You're having a laugh.
No, well,
£1 billion for
pounds.
a business that seems to simply be a board on which you can put your baby pictures.
It's good, isn't it? It's great. £1 billion for Instagram. So basically what's happened is Zuckerberg has gone, thanks Instagram, thanks for all your work. Now I'm putting my people in. And I want you lot out. And it's been quite interesting to watch. There's been the former now CEO of Instagram has been putting up photos on Instagram, obviously, all smiley and cheery and saying thanks for the time and good luck to Facebook's people coming in. But there's a kind of serious side to this because it's quite concerning, and for me it represents sort of a trend that we've seen more predominantly as well since the financial crisis, where the reach of a small handful of corporations, if you like,
getting smaller and smaller. The oligarchy is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, they're talking about the Russian oligarchy.
500 people now own 2/3 of the wealth of the world.
Yeah,
500 people.
And exactly
Across, you could get them in this room.
Yeah. probably, and that's crazy, isn't it? Really, but and
completely insane.
Yeah, and this whole story sort of underscores that issue where since the financial crisis, not least because of the way banks don't lend to small businesses anymore, I think in part, but I also think in part it's a systematic move that's been designed to give massive companies more monopoly over everything. We're seeing the breaking up of smaller companies now, and ultimately, I mean, from a social media point of view, not least, I mean, we want Facebook
I mean,
controlling
Instagram, presumably, Instagram sold themselves to Facebook at great profit for a very few individuals. It doesn't make a great deal of difference to me. I mean, baby pictures are baby pictures. Whether the board on which they're stuck, pinned, is owned by Facebook or owned by Instagram doesn't make a great deal of difference to me. But here's something. Now, you're a younger man than me. You're also more tech savvy than me.
Really?
I don't understand why we need to allow that to happen. For example, a mate of mine has started an alternative Twitter called Ticket.
I've seen that, yes. Yeah.
Now, as far as I could see, there's no difference between Ticket and Twitter except name recognition.
Yeah.
And therefore a go-to instinct. It's not that Twitter is better in what it does than Ticket, because hey, what's complicated about it? You're just providing a board where people can write and share. Ditto Facebook. I mean, why don't the Russians have a Facebook? Why don't the Chinese have a Facebook? Why don't the Bulgarians have a Facebook?
Yeah.
Why does everybody have to be on the American Facebook?
Yeah.
Why are you giving these people monopoly power?
Exactly, and that's a very good point. But I think there's a real deeper issue at play here, and that is the way that social media has now become and is now being used by the corporations that run the world to effectively exert some sort of control over us as citizens and what we do. I mean, your news feeds on Facebook are now controlled by Facebook
being
entirely.
Ruthlessly manipulated.
You are.
I see it on my own Facebook. I've got 600,000 followers on Facebook, and that which I used to be able to freely share and share to hundreds of thousands of people at a time are now 20,000, 25,000. Yeah. Clearly somebody's manipulating it somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've experienced the same as well. Then you have the way the advertising is set up on all websites, where websites cache your history and tailor adverts to suit you, so they bombard you with things you've already been looking at, so you just continue are encouraged to buy the same things from the same companies over and over again. And it's this subversive corporate control.
And then there's banning people. I mean, I know it's a more vexed issue. And for example, that guy Alex Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how much I loathe and despise that guy. But when they banned him, we should have realized that they were going to start banning other people that we loved.
Exactly.
Next. So Jimmy Dore, for example, the American, he's banned. I mean, they're actually taking a scythe to anyone who is far enough out of the mainstream orthodoxy.
Yeah.
They haven't done it to me because I've got maybe slightly too many followers and slightly too well known.
Yeah.
But people with a bit less and a bit less well known are being ruthlessly purged.
You say it all the time, yeah, and you're quite right about Alex Jones. It doesn't matter if you agree with his views or not, and of course this is the old adage that I don't have to agree with your views, I'll defend them to the death. It doesn't matter if you agree with Alex Jones or not. The point is, should he be shut down for saying what he may or may not think, whether I think he's a bit of a PR guy as well. I think he's very good at creating a brand for himself. Yeah. But it doesn't matter. The whole point of the social media is supposed to be free speech, and it's so far removed from free speech now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but you get my point. There's no barrier to us making our own Facebook. The only barrier is how we get everyone to know about it.
This is a challenge, exactly. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that is the way forward. I mean, it kind of plays into, in some bizarre respects, my issues with the Labour Party conference, that maybe we should be looking at more things we can do together as opposed to things that political parties can do for us. But yeah, there's no barrier in that at all. And I think as a species and as a society, that's the way we need to be moving forward more, is doing things for ourselves, taking corporations out of it. Because if we're not very careful, and you see it in social media, you see it in the way that Western governments now operate, we're staring into the abyss of a very, very dystopian future, something that was regarded as science fiction in the 70s and 80s.
Did you see the film Elysium?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
That's the way, if we're not careful,
Yeah.
we'll end. The ruling elite will be
Up in
either
space.
literally or metaphorically up in a space station that looks like heaven, the Garden of Eden, and the rest of us will be fighting each other literally to the death back on Earth.
I don't think that's an exaggeration. I really don't. It concerns me greatly. It's one of my biggest worries, and I talk about it a lot with Nicola and other people, that we are heading to a very dystopian future. And I don't think people realise. And you see it, and you especially see it with the welfare state, universal credit, which I've written about a lot. It's essentially what universal credit does. It segregates the undeserving poor all into one easy little manageable group where they're all getting the same benefit and they're all getting the same amount of money and they're all sort of left to their own devices, and then everyone else. And that's extremely dystopian, that you have literally this underclass being created.
It's apartheid, actually.
Well, yes,
apartheid to people of the same colour.
Yeah, it's class apartheid,
Yeah.
isn't it? And it's happening, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges that we face, but also one of the biggest challenges that no one really talks about. But
The Labour Party conference didn't rise to
No.
these kind of challenges. In fact, the more I'm listening to you and the more I'm thinking back on the conference, it kind of was nothing.
Yeah.
It kind of changed nothing.
Yeah.
And insofar as it made waves, it tried to split the waves. So we have a situation where nobody in the country, and by the way, the Tories will ruthlessly exploit this, nobody in the country knows whether Labour is going to implement Brexit or not.
No.
That's what the net effect of Corbyn, McDonald's, Len McCluskey saying one thing, and Keir Starmer in prime time, with the support of most of the media, saying the opposite.
Yeah.
The end result is, for tens of millions of voters, Labour doesn't seem that keen on that on Brexit, and I really want Brexit, so I'm going to have to vote for the Tories. It's very dangerous. 65% of all constituencies were Labour, which returned Labour MPs, voted for Brexit.
Yeah.
And so if only a couple of thousand, in some cases a few hundreds, change from Labour to Conservative, the seat changes hands.
Exactly.
This is what's not being appreciated. You can pile up all your pro-EU votes in North London that you like. You can give Emily Thornberry a 75,000 majority if you like. But if you lose 5 seats in Yorkshire
You're screwed.
and Staffordshire and Derbyshire and the North East and the North West and the South West and South Wales, you've lost the election.
exactly. Put that on Instagram.
Well, we've been Topple Galloway. We have struggled manfully through the man flu. We're beginning to get a second wind.
Well,
We
just
might
as it's
keep
all over.
going, just as the show comes to an end, we're both feeling a little perkier. Let's hope next week we're pinky and perky.
Oh, God. Yes, let's hope we are. And as always, if you want to get involved, we appreciate your comments. There's been some great ones coming in. Once again, people seem obsessed with our clothing, don't they?
And why not? What's not to love?
No, I know, but apparently I was told go back to baseball hats, so I've gone back to baseball hats.
It's a very
this
nice
week.
hat.
Thank you.
No, I liked you in your pork pie hat, actually.
I wear that. I was off for the
It was
viewers.
a homage to me.
Well, it wasn't George, I'm afraid, no. It was for the viewers at home. I was off to film something else after filming the show last week, and I had to look a bit smarter. Whereas in the comfort of this palatial environment, I feel I can go rogue.
Go rough.
Go rough. I can wear what I want. Whereas I was filming proper TV afterwards. Not this even better than TV that you get with Topple Galloway, of course.
Topple Galloway.
But we appreciate your comments.
And it's been all free.
It has. We are back to being on Patreon next week, though. So if you've liked these past 4 weeks, as we always say, please subscribe on Patreon. It's around, less than 20 pence a show, isn't it?
It's peanuts. It's about 16 pence per show at today's exchange rate.
Exactly. So do get involved, subscribe, and hopefully then we'll see you next week.
You can't even get peanuts for 16 pence.
I don't think you can anymore. No. God forbid after Brexit.
There'll be no peanuts after Brexit. Just one more thing. You see, the whole point about the Labour fudge on Brexit is that it clears the way for Theresa May to call an early khaki election where she can portray herself as Mrs. Britain, the one person that you can count on to implement the democratic decision of the majority of the British in the Brexit referendum, and caricature Mr. Corbyn and his lieutenants as fifth columnists, agents of the European Union, and then fill the airwaves with patriotic bilge. There's no point in complaining about it. That's exactly what she would do. And guess who wins a contest like that? The most false of dichotomies, another Tory victory.
Just one more thing. I cannot do this episode of Topple Galloway without addressing the issue of welfare in the Labour Party conference even more. Now, some accuse me of exaggerating what's going on in this country, that I'm being hyperbolic, if you like, about the plight of disabled people, sick people and unemployed people. I'm not, and for me, the Labour Party conference has betrayed every single sick, disabled and unemployed person in this country. Margaret Greenwood, Shadow Secretary of State, has done nothing to alleviate the fears of these groups of people, and the party has done nothing because essentially their welfare policy has made no moves since last year's manifesto. Nothing has changed, absolutely nothing has changed. Pinnacle of this is them not committing to scrap universal credit, with John McDonnell having to backtrack offside at a fringe event and say, well, we think we might do it. This is not good enough. DWP released figures which show that 10,000 people in the work-related activity group of Employment and Support Allowance died in 3 years. These are people who are supposed to be moving towards work. If that is not enough for Labour to get off their arses and start doing some proper, decent work on this issue, I don't know what is.